So welcome. My name is Chris Hurley. I am one of the career advisors, part of the career and professional development team. I'm really excited to be talking with you today. Joining me is Alicia Alex, who is also part of the career and professional development team as our associate director. They will be kind of joining us part of the Q&A session. I'll be kind of managing the beginning part. I do just want to welcome everyone and thank you for taking some time and being with us today, especially during this challenging time. Welcome to Money Matters Budgeting Basics. This webinar is going to be recorded, so you can reference it back. So it will be uploaded to our Vimeo channel shortly after the webinar. I do want to provide just a brief disclaimer that I am not a financial advisor. So I am a career advisor, but not a financial advisor. So each person's financial situation is different. The presentation that we have today is built off of some general guidelines. So if you're looking for professional financial advising or assistance, please seek out a professional financial advisor because each person's financial situation is unique. So just keep that in mind while we're going through things, that these are kind of more general broad strokes. So in this workshop, we're really hoping that you'll take away an understanding of what a budget is and why you need one. Become familiar with some financial terms. So we'll go over some common terms that are used when talking about budgeting. How to get real with your financial situations. That could be really hard, and we'll kind of discuss like why that's important. How to create a simple budget and stick with it, and as well as developing a plan for future savings. And our hope is that ultimately this can culminate into advocating for your creative career. So budgeting can seem really hard and scary and complicated. And so our goal of this workshop is to really walk you through the basics so that you feel really comfortable in creating your own budget and really taking charge of your financial journey and towards financial independence. So we'll talk more about what financial independence is. But the goal of budgeting is to feel just less stressed about your finances. So for you to not have to worry about how you're going to pay, for groceries or for rent or, for your day-to-day lives, so that you feel like you have a really good, comfortable understanding of your own personal finances. And I also just want to help break the stigma and feeling shame about talking about money, that it is something that's good to talk about, and that the more we talk about it, the better off we'll all be. So going over some terms. So first, just budgeting. So what is budgeting? So budgeting is giving the money that you have a specific job and tracking it, understanding how much money is coming in and where that money is going out. So really just understanding that cash flow. Also be talking about like income and revenue. So you'll hear those terms throughout the presentation today. So income is the money that you are receiving, the money that you take in exchange for your skills like services and time. So you'll hear me say income and revenue interchangeably. And then the other kind of key term that we'll be using today is expenses. And this is the money that is going out. So the money that you are using and spending on goods and services out in the world. So how does budgeting relate to career and professional development? So it's like kind of like asking like, well, why is the CPD team talking about this? And so we think that it's really important, just you holistically as young professionals and individuals, but also just having a budget will help you along the road to financial freedom and financial independence, and that we talked about in an earlier slide. So financial independence, just really having the ability to have some flexibility in what you do and kind of live within your own means, and it gives you the freedom to work towards your own professional goals. So that could be whether you want to take a leap in like a new job or take a risk with a new job. A good example I can personally provide is with my personal financial freedom and financial planning. Like I was able to take this job, which I was way more passionate about and excited to take in comparison to my last job, even though it was less money. So being able to kind of understand where your finances are really helped me make that decision. And understanding my own budget really put things in perspective and gave me a realistic understanding of what the next best step was for me and my family. So that's just something to consider. It might, if you're interested in this, it will definitely help if you're interested in starting your own business. So if that is something that interests in you, understanding finances is really important. And as well as just like learning how to manage your own personal budget will give you an understanding, you know, of like your freelance, and if you are doing freelance, and understanding like your business budgeting side of things and how things can work. A lot of artists and designers do work in like a freelance capacity in some way, so it allows you to really understand them. And then with freelancing, like some of the numbers and categories in a budget might be a little bit different, but the concept overall is still the same. So in this presentation, we're hoping to really equip you with those tools and understanding your own personal budget and how it can maybe bleed over into your creative career. So the first step is to get real with our money. That is kind of like the first step, and it could be one of the harder steps and hardest steps, especially if you've never done it before, and especially if you've had maybe some bad spending habits in the past. So this can be really hard because we are taking a critical look at our own expenses and coming to terms with maybe some financial mistakes that we've made in the past. And the biggest thing I encourage you to do is to not let your past paralyze you, but to look to the future, to a healthier, financial situation. So what does this like getting real with your money actually look like? Well, the first thing we want to do is we want to write out all of our income. So this can be particularly challenging, especially if you are doing a freelance, working in like the freelance sector and you have multiple streams of income coming through. So that could be a little bit of a challenge, but we just want to document everything that's coming in to as far as finances go. We also want to write out all of our expenses. So a good place to start is utilizing maybe our last month's expenses as just a good starting place if you've never done this before. And it's just, a good place to start. You also can use your last month's income if you've have an income as a good place to start in documenting your income as well. You also want to categorize all of your expenses. So in the next slide, we'll be talking like really in depth on how to categorize them and some ways that we recommend that. So the importance of categorizing is to, again, kind of help us organize and give that each expense a space in our budget. And so there are 5 expense categories that we recommend you start with or start thinking about. The first one being essential. So these are things that you absolutely need. This can include like rent, groceries, utilities, car payments, things that have to get paid every month. The next is securities. So this could be things like investments. It could be an emergency fund, and we'll talk about an emergency fund and what that is a little bit later, as well as like paying off debts, things like student loan debts. We also want to have a section for our goals. This can be for vacations, big ticket items, down payment for a house. An example could be like, I recently got married, so like my wedding was a big goal, and whatever kind of these bigger goals are for you. The next one is lifestyle. So these are things like your clothing, your haircuts, gifts that you have for other folks, your gym memberships, and then the last one being discretionary. So this is going out to eat, spending on hobbies, for me, like I like to go to the Korean spa, so going to the spa. So these categories are listed in a hierarchical order from like necessary to least necessary. So just keep that in mind. But at the end of the day, how you choose to organize is really up to you. The important thing is for every expense to have a place. So for example, I actually don't organize by these 5 categories or just recommendations, but for me and my family, the way that works the best is we look at like immediate obligations, like such as like bills, our day-to-day expenses, big ticket goals, as well as like fun things, which is kind of the discretionary funds, like eating out and things like that. Some people only have 2 categories, essential and discretionary. So it really is up to you how you organize it, but just stick with it once you've built out these categories and let it go for a couple months and before you feel like it's not necessarily working. It's also important that like everything you spend fits within one of these categories that you built. So just keep that in mind. So once you've kind of developed these categories and have things going, you really want to sit down and create that budget utilizing those categories. So there's a couple of ways to do this. A simple Excel sheet or a Google sheet is possible. We've actually built out a resource sheet, and I'll go over that in the next slide. And that sheet is available to you. We'll be emailing it out to all the participants today. You can also utilize apps such as Mint, which is free. It's a really popular one. You Need a Budget is another popular one. It's actually the one I use. There is a subscription fee, a yearly subscription fee. So that is just something to be aware of. What's really nice about these budgeting apps is a lot of them can be connected to directly to your bank or credit cards. So this means that they can automatically import your transactions, where utilizing like an Excel or Google Sheet is going to be a lot more manual. So just definitely some pros and cons to those. And so as I said, we did build out this Google Sheet for you, and this will be available to you and all students eventually on our website, but we're just going to kind of pilot it out to the folks that are in this presentation today. So some highlights of this sheet is, it has a really great, category system for you. It's tracking all of those, things like our revenue, our expenses, what our essential expenses are, our securities, things like that. And again, you'll be able to take this and if you want to use it, you can adjust it for your own needs. It also provides a nice summary on the right-hand side. So we get a nice summary of our total revenue, our total expenses, and kind of if we have a remaining balance. So as you can see, we actually have a surplus of $239.01 from this budget that we mock budget that we created as an example. And then the last bit is it is showcasing in a really visual way through a graph of how this money is being spent. So we're able to see that a majority of our money is going towards our essentials, so things like rent and utilities, and that's a good thing, right? We want to have a good balance. So things to consider while you're creating a budget, right? We want to set goals. This will kind of help us plan for some of those big ticket items, like I said, perhaps buying a new car, or if you're interested in buying a house or things like that. We do want to make sure that we give every dollar a job. So as in the last slide, we saw that we had a surplus of 200 and something dollars, right? We want to make sure that we give all of our money, even that kind of quote unquote leftover money, a job. And so whether we add maybe a little bit more fun money that month, or maybe we look into some of our investments or building out our emergency fund. We won't be covering investments today, but if there is a strong demand and a strong interest from the Art Center community, I'd be happy to kind of explore that with you a little bit deeper. If you've built out a budget and it's looking a little grim and you're like, oh no, I need more money, there are kind of two things that you can do. You can either increase revenue or you can decrease your expenses. I will say decreasing your expenses is a lot easier to do, and it's within your control versus increasing your revenue. So just take that into consideration. Budgeting is something that you have to consistently work on and consistently keep up to date. So just make sure that you're doing it on a regular basis. Consider doing it every pay period or doing it on a monthly basis. And it's always good just to budget some kind of fun money for yourself, regardless of how small it is, even if it's just a couple of dollars. Because some days we just need that splurge of getting a cup of coffee or whatever we need in that moment. So just make sure that you are budgeting a little bit of fun money for yourself. So we're going to move on to talking about emergency funds. So an emergency fund is a stash of money that you set aside to cover for financial surprises that life throws your way. So it's coming from Vanguard. And in a recent, a survey that was conducted, I believe in 2017 by Bankrate.com, it showed that only 63% of 63% of Americans don't have enough savings to cover a $500 emergency. And so that is just a really scary place to be, that if something were to happen, and so some of the reasons that you could need an emergency fund could include a sudden job loss. A lot of folks are experiencing that right now in our current situation with COVID-19. So this can really help you through that process. Medical emergencies, housing troubles. So car breaks down. What do? You need a car. Unexpected travel, just things that really come up that you're not expecting. And so what an emergency fund really is doing is it's buying you time in a crisis. So it's allowing you to take a breath, take a moment, and understand how you can or get organized and how to move forward through a crisis. And so creating an emergency fund, it can take some time and it could be a little challenging, but you use the budget that you created to understand what your monthly expenses are. Uh, so when we're kind of going through a crisis or things like that, it's really important for us to know exactly what do we have to spend our money on and what can we maybe cut back on. So really understanding what those essential monthly expenses is a good step to creating your emergency fund. You don't have to create one or create an emergency fund in 1 month, right? So let's say you do all the calculations, you say, all right, it's going to cost me $1,700 a month or $2,000 a month to have, as an emergency fund. You want to take your time in building that towards it. It is like a process. So you also just want to hold off on any other investments. Like if you are looking to make investments in, for example, stocks, right? Hold off on all those investments until you've made an emergency fund, because that is cash on hand that you can easily use during an emergency. Really want to work towards having 3 to 6 months worth of your expenses saved up for an emergency fund. Some people have different thresholds of comfort. For example, for me, I'm actually a lot more comfortable at 9 months worth of expenses. So, and that's just me because I'm a crazy person sometimes, but 3 to 6 months is what's recommended. You also want to use a high yield interest savings account to save for your emergency fund. So a high yield interest savings account will give you just a greater interest rate. So a lot of savings accounts have interest rates. Most of the time they're relatively low. A high yield savings account will just give you a little bit more. So just do some research into what a good high yield savings account is for you. And just as a caveat there, an emergency fund rate is not the same as investments. We're not expecting to make a lot of money from this interest or things like that through our emergency fund. Instead, you really should, it's really there to be used in case of an emergency. And that's the last bit. It's just making sure that we're clearly defining what an emergency is for you, and that it should only be used for emergency situations. So where this can kind of impact our career, and we're not going to go too deep into this, but just kind of giving you some things to think about and connect with, using your budgeting skills to set your price specifically as a freelancer or as an artist, and thinking about the animation industry and things like that have day rates. So you can use your budget and budgeting skills to help reverse engineer to set your price for your products and services. So review things like market rates using Glassdoor or Salary.com or PayScale, so to help you understand your hourly rate. And then you can utilize this formula of hour rate times number of hours, estimated number of hours that you'll be working on something, plus the cost of materials can equal the price, product, or service. So as you can see, we're doing a similar thing where specifically with understanding our cost of materials, we're looking at what is and categorizing all those things of what are the materials that we're actually using and how can it impact the price of our service. So if you want to know more, I'm excited to share that the Center of Student Experience, the CSE, is hosting another financial health workshop scheduled for June 25th. So they might be touching on a few different subjects than what we've touched on. So just things to consider, and want to look out for their emails from their office for more information. And I feel like I ran through that really quickly, but I just want to thank again everyone for being here. We have a nice little crowd with us today. Hope that this was really helpful. Again, this is recorded, so if you do want to go back and kind of review things, we'll be posting it on our Vimeo site. On this slide, we have some information on how to stay connected with us, right? We have our email, careers@artscenter.edu, our website, artscentercpd.com, as well as our Instagram at artscenter.cpd. We're posting a lot of great stuff on our Instagram, a lot of kind of micro snippets on how to continue on your professional journey. So with that, I'll be turning off the recording at this time, and we'll be opening it up to the Q&A.